Hi, welcome to Mental Health Monday. We are taking our mental health road trip and we are on week 2. And so if you would like to go back and catch the week 1, which is meeting people where they are, we are on this road trip together and we're going to end the stigma for mental health and just get out there and advocate a little bit in our own lives, in our communities, with just the relationships that we have together. And so I love being on this journey with you. I am Heidi Gaiman from HeidiGaiman.com, and we do Mental Health Mondays every Monday live on Facebook at noon and on Instagram at 12:30, both Central Standard Time. And you can always catch the archives on YouTube on the Heidi Gaiman Writes Facebook, or I don't know what I'm talking about. The Heidi Gaiman Writes YouTube channel. So today we're going to do week 2 of the mental health road trip, and we're going to talk about change and transitions. This is really important, I think, just to get us to a better place of recognizing the effect that change has on our life. We could push against it all the time. Like, has anybody been a part of an organization where you tried to create change? And how did that go? Was it easy? Or was it maybe a little bit more difficult? I have very rarely seen change be something that's easy. Sometimes it's easier than others, and sometimes it is, jumps upon us and we don't have a choice. We just have to walk through the change. But at the same time, it's just never easy. And so I think recognizing that life has a lot of change and transition can be really useful. I was watching a TED Talk. No, was it a TED Talk? No, it was a Freakonomics podcast episode a couple weeks ago, and it was about math and how math is taught in the schools today. But one thing I thought was interesting is that one of the biggest barriers to getting math taught a little bit differently in our education curriculum was that people literally said, if math changes, then anything can change. And that was really uncomfortable for them. And so I think that just reveals a little bit about how we feel about change in our culture. And I don't think that's unique to America. I think that's human nature, actually. But there is a place in our life for change and a place for transitions. And so we're going to go through 3 points today. The first one is change takes longer than you think. It takes longer than you think. And this is true of organizations, like we said, and kind of just muscling through like the fact that it takes some time for our churches to change. It takes some time for family units to change when you've introduced like a new person, if you brought a baby home from the hospital or if you've adopted a new person into your life, or if you're going through like an empty nest season, it takes time. And I have a little theory that I think that it takes at least about 18 months when we have any kind of major change in life to get our feet back under us, that we, just maybe need to give ourselves a little grace period, a little extra rest, extra water, extra exercise, extra friendship and care when we go through a change. But it is longer than you think. I think we'd like it to take 3 months or under, honestly. And I don't have the research for my theory yet. Maybe I'll work on that in my doctoral dissertation someday. But I do think it takes longer than we think. And just like grief, if you think about it, we now know that it takes a good year at least to go through the stages of grief in kind of a roller coaster fashion and around and back and forth and everything. But it also, it applies to other things. And I honestly believe that it takes much longer than a year. Again, I think it takes at least 18 months. I think I've seen that especially when families move to a new location, that it takes a little time to get, again, our feet back under us, to feel like we're back at a place of kind of normalcy, if that is even a thing. But we feel like, okay, I can manage now. I kind of know what I'm doing a little bit. I am familiar with this new life, if you will. And then the same thing is true like for when families have a mom maybe go back to work or change where a mom stays home, those kind of big transitions. Or we send a kindergartner off to school, or for you young adults out there, for when you go to college or when you get a job or move out of your parents' home. Those are some big life transitions, and they will take longer than you think to feel a little bit more stable. My kids are home today. I don't know if you can hear them being a little bit noisy. Happy Columbus Day. Happy Canadian Thanksgiving, Canadians. So just be aware there's stages to change. And we'll do that on a different Mental Health Monday, maybe some stages of change. But just know that there's a place where we're kind of contemplating change. Excuse me. Children, shh. We are nothing if not real here at Heidi Game and Rights. So there's like some contemplation. We're like thinking about changing, or even before we're even thinking about changing, then there's contemplation, then we're preparing to change, and then we have the actual change, and then we have to kind of maintain where we're at from the change, and then sometimes we go backwards like the roller coaster and all that good stuff. And so that is, just so you know, a little overview of the stages of change, and we'll get into that another time. But it takes time. It just takes a lot of time. So that's point one. Point two, change brings growth. Change brings so much growth in our life, and that is worthwhile. I think we see this especially like in organizations or in communities, where communities are kind of forced into change. They get to a place, gosh, my kids are being really, really noisy, really noisy. Yeva and Zeke, it's too loud. Please stop. Now I am disciplining you on the internet, so please stop. Stop. Thank you. Okay, they think it's so funny. Okay. It brings growth. It brings growth. It brings growth. And so just, that's a really helpful concept about change. When you are walking through change, when you're able to see a change, maybe if you're just kind of struggling and not sure why, like, oh, what kind of changes am I going through is a good question. But just remind yourself that God is growing. God is growing. Oh, good. Sarah says that you guys could still hear me. Good. So one thing that is in change theory or in systems theory is that we are always moving toward growth, or we are moving toward death or destruction or disintegration, really. And so just keep that idea in mind that, we could stop growing. We could stop the change and be like, no. But then in reality, first of all, that's just half the time not even possible, right? Like our bodies are always changing because of the aging process. The earth itself is moving, towards disintegration until Jesus restores it again. And that's a change. We can't control it. And so just knowing that we can either move with the growth or we can kind of move backwards. That's what change theory says. And I think it's really wise to keep in mind. One thing, I'm going to give you a practical tip that I think is really helpful, is to get a plant. Just a little house plant or a succulent even that you don't have to take care of. It can be pretend from IKEA or something. This is not an ad for IKEA. Or a cactus even. I am very into low maintenance plants or an herb. And just remind yourself of the growth. Get your change plant out when you need it and be like, God is growing me. God is growing me. And that can just be a small reminder for you. Anybody in the listeners right now, do you guys have any changes that come to mind in regular life or transitions that we go through from one life stage to another, whether that's in your own life, in kids' lives, in the life of an organization that you're a part of, or what kind of changes do you see in the world around us? I'd love to hear from you. So throw those up in the comments, and we're going to go over some of those in just a minute. The last point on change and transition, let me use diction, is that God created us for change. He is unchanging. He is unchanging. And so sometimes oftentimes I think we confuse ourselves with God. We take his attributes and we put them on ourselves. And while we are given things like grace by God, and when his love fills us and we go share it, I think one thing that's really important is that we are not God. And so we do not get to have all of his attributes, and we certainly don't have them in perfection. So one important one is that God is unchanging and we do change. That is part of our makeup and the way he created us. And so, the book of James says that he does not shift in shadows. And that's an important reality that we want to ground ourselves. That's our foundation, is that God doesn't change. The foundation is not that we don't change, or that the world doesn't change, or that church doesn't change, or that, like, even, sorry, my fellow Lutherans, I love you, but that the liturgy doesn't change. These are not the foundations. Those are good things that we want to have in our lives, but they even can change, and we will be changing because we are made for change, whether we like it or not. And so knowing that God is the thing that doesn't change, and that's what we rest on, and that will really change our our seasons of change and transition. Just acknowledging it, noticing it. You don't have to try to change it. Ironic pun there. But just like, oh, this must be a season of change. Oh, what kind of transition am I going through? Because life is just full of so many big transitions. Katie said that kids going back to school each year is a big transition, and that's so true. And even there's like little ones in that, like the fact that, my kids had a short week last week and they have the day off today. And so this coming day, Tuesday morning is going to be a bear because we're like transitioning to going back to school again and then getting back in a routine. And you can see how in that little microcosm of kids and school year and stuff, how change just really impacts and transition really impacts our mental health. So just keeping ourselves healthy by recognizing it, saying, oh, look, okay, oh, we're transitioning. Oh, they're a little grouchy because we're transitioning, and keeping kind of what we can keep the same, and then going with the flow for changes too. Katie also says there are similar changes, but each year it looks a little different. That's really true. And as we're going to grow and develop in that. And so our transitions will never look the same exactly as someone else or the transition we had last year or whatever, but we can learn from them. So I just want to share with you a tiny reading from Casting Stones. This is a small, shameless ad, but if you do struggle with change and transition, if you want more on this, my book, Casting Stones, walks through Ecclesiastes 3 and is really about the seasons of life and change and transition. And so I recommend you pick it up on Amazon. It's $9.99. You can find a link at HeidiGaiman.com/Casting Stones, and there's some extras and stuff there too. And I just want to read to you from page 16, this tiny bit. Recognizing that God weaves us in and out of seasons in our lives, we can stand through the dark stuff knowing that this shall pass. When we're waiting desperately for something, we can be assured that our season for that may be just around the corner. It gives us a little bit of patience and a whole lot of assurance that our God holds our days in his hands. The same God who sends the sun over the horizon and causes it to set at dusk, the God who makes the snow fall and the flowers spring up a few months later, holds our lives and our plans close to his heart. So just know that God is in that change. Go buy that plant, do it. Share with me in the comments what kind of changes you're going through right now, or what kind of transitions. How has God met you on the road of your changes and transitions? Sarah says, the cousin that they were caring for graduated from high school, but isn't really in college yet. And so there's a change in the dynamics of the household. And yeah, that high school graduation time, whether it's someone we're caring for or that we love, or our own children, or our own experience in that lifetime of, graduating from high school and moving out, that's a huge transition. And so just giving more grace in that time for ourselves and for others. Making some goals and stuff is good. What do we want this to look like in 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, whatever. But at the same time, knowing that it takes some time, give ourselves some time, get that plant, and remember that God's growing you in the midst of the change. And so that is our very small mental health road trip on changes and transitions. You can find more mental health stuff on HeidiGaiman.com/mental health. And next week, we will be doing week 3, the resource wilderness. The resource wilderness. In the meantime, join our road trip on HeidiGaiman.com and our Bible study of roads. And I think that'll give you a little encouragement for any change or transition too. All right, it's always good to be with you, and I'll see you next time. I'll be on again real shortly to do our bonus episode on play for adolescents and teens.